Yoshi's Woolly World, the 2015 2D platformer Wii U game that people liked, but seems to be overshadowed nowadays. The game features 6 massively knitted worlds, but today I want Yoshi's feet to stay grounded, as I ask the question, is it possible to beat Yoshi's Woolly World without jumping? Now, as for the rules of this challenge, we do need to define a jump, because it's not as clear-cut as you'd think. Pretty much, the basic jump is all we need to be looking out for, and everything else is fair game. Yes, that even includes bouncing, fluttering, multiplayer, and badges. However, like my No Woobles video, I will be banning specifically the Clear the Course badge because it is way too overpowered and will remove all sense of a challenge from this video. I'll also be banning Mellow Mode, a sort of easy mode for the game, which lets you infinitely flutter with no consequences, as it would also make things too easy. I should also probably address the transform ability. There are sections in the game where Yoshi will transform into other things, which will completely change his moveset. But because all of these transformations are so different, it'd be impossible to try and figure out a rule set which would apply and make sense to every transformation. So I'll just be ignoring them. Now, with that said, I think we can begin the challenge. We enter the first level, Yarn Yoshi Takes Shape, and it will teach us the absolute fundamentals of this challenge. The first thing we do when entering this level is fall into an impossible to get out of pit. I didn't think I'd have to pull it out so soon, but there is a way around this, that being multiplayer. With multiplayer, this once impossible pit becomes quite trivial, as we can simply throw one player across and then use the egg button, which allows one player to come to another. This will be our main method for getting vertical height for this challenge. Now, as for the rest of this level, we can repeat that same trick over and over to make it to the end. However, I have to mention that I am playing alone, and that I have to be controlling both of these players simultaneously by myself. Which means, while this level had no specific points of interest, that's not to say it was easy, as having to adapt to this unconventional control method was very hard. It took an embarrassing amount of time to even beat the first level like this, but in the end it was possible. Luckily, the next 2 levels also had no specific points of interest to bring up, but that's not to say they were a cakewalk. I cannot stress enough how hard this control method was, so while they both still took a while to complete, it was nothing impossible, and our first big roadblock comes at 1-4, Big Montgomery's Fort. This level is designed around moving platforms such as seesaws, and while those were challenging, no doubt, the real issue comes when we're put against these 2 screws. They rotate when you stand on them, which is an issue because we're not near fast enough to use both players. My first instinct would be to ignore the screws altogether and try and throw one player up. However, they would just go off screen and die. I was stumped for a while and I was just messing around and this happened. Why did it work that time? What did I do differently? I have absolutely no idea. I tried the same thing multiple other times, but whatever, it worked, so I'll take it. But that's only half the battle, as I still have to talk about the first boss in this run, Big Montgomery. He's one of the most simple bosses in concept, just jump on his head 3 times. However, that's an issue for obvious reasons. The approach I went for this boss fight was to throw one player in the air and try and catch that player on their head to keep them airborne, which at that point, you just need to hope and pray nothing hits the bottom player, and then you flutter over to hit his head. And then when he's in a stun state, you just need to hope the game will miraculously let you climb up him, and then once you do that, you can hit him once! I think you can now see why this was such a struggle. After a couple of attempts though, I was able to somehow pull it off. Fortunately for me, the rest of this world is pretty tame. Well, everything apart from the last level, but the Bashful's Castle. This level's gimmick is swinging balls. I promise it's not weird. I don't even think I need to explain why this would be an issue, but I will anyway. It's already hard enough having to use 2 controllers to throw each other, but add the fact that I now have to be actively balancing on these makes it more than a little difficult. But you'll probably be surprised to hear that that wasn't even the hardest part of this level. No, the real issue came here when I needed to get from down here to up there. You'd think it'd be as simple as 2 throws, but if we work backwards for a second, we can't make it from down here to up to the key without killing the other player. This means we have to keep the enemies alive to bounce on, which by extension makes the first throw an issue, as you could potentially harm those enemies which we need. After more than a bit, I managed to wiggle my way up, but I of course then died. One begrudging keeping up later and we're at the boss, which is a lot easier than the last, which means we can move on to World 2. 2-1 across the Fluttering Dunes was the worst thing this game has thrown at me thus far, and all because of one section in particular. Now I'm sure you've noticed by now that the way we move isn't exactly quick, which is why this section is such an issue. Now in a normal playthrough, these ribbon waves would stop you from progressing, so you need to hit a timed switch to stop the ribbons, and make some quick platforming so you can make it across the ribbons before they start going again. The timer is so tight that this was the first time I actually started to question how possible this run really was. The strategy I started with was hitting the switch, egging the other player to get on top of each other to try and bounce my way up. Unfortunately, I soon realised this was way too slow of a method and I'd need to find another way. I would have just thrown the other player, however, that would result in them dying off screen. Or so I thought. Turns out if I did the perfect throw, I would just barely be able to make it so the other player didn't die. But it cannot be understated how precise this was, especially on a strict timer. So I tried the best I could, but I was starting to lose hope. But I couldn't give up. I just knew it was possible, so I pressed onwards. And eventually, all that effort paid off when I finally got the perfect attempt. I got the perfect throw and just barely scraped my head through in time. That was a close one. Let's hope we don't have to do anything like that again. But just in case you thought I'd catch a break after that, you'd be mistaken, as 2-2 was nothing but annoying, and 2-3 Walk the Chomp to Unwind was also giving me trouble. Now, while the entire level was super tedious, annoying, and difficult, there aren't any specific sections worth bringing up. Except one. That ball has a chain chomp in it from earlier in the level, and all you need to know is I need to get it from down there to up where we are. Now normally you'd free the chain chomp and jump up as it follows you. You'd think to just leave one player at the top, free it, egg that player on the bottom, and then let it jump up to you. But this chain jump is very picky and will only jump if you're standing right here. But after some shenanigans, I did it. But after 4 bad levels in a row, surely there couldn't be a 5th, right? 2-4, Notwing the Koopa's Fort. Or rather, Notwing the Koopa himself. For this boss fight, you're supposed to wait for an opportunity to slurp up his string like spaghetti, which most of the time means waiting for him to slam on the ground. The issue is the fact you need to be at a very specific height. You can't do it while you're on the ground, and just in case you thought we could do the same thing as we did with Big Montgomery and just stay in the air, he does the same thing, so we'll just get hit if we try. But if that's all this boss fight was, it'd be a little annoying, but nothing particularly noteworthy. The issue comes with his attacks, one in particular. He'll just bounce across the stage, and unless you're at full health or already prepared, you will just die, which happened more than you may think. Luckily, if we know how to just tank the hits with one player while keeping the other one protected, we can basically have infinite health, which makes this fight difficult, but not impossible. And I don't know what got I upset, but whoever they are decided I should suffer, as apparently 5 hard levels in a row wasn't enough, and that they should double it and give it to the next person. There is no next person. Starting with 2-5 Spiky Stroll, like in 2-2 there were no particular points of interest, the issue just came with how the level layout made me play super slow and cautious, which is an issue when I died multiple times. Each death would send me back multiple minutes, which quickly gets annoying. Halfway through the level we're introduced to Poochie. Aw, how cute. I hate him. For whatever reason, Poochie was being super uncooperative. I'll take this attempt as an example. What's supposed to happen is you dismount and then he should follow you from below so you can remount. But for whatever reason he just didn't, he just sat there doing nothing, which caused me to die. And when things like that kept happening, you can see why this level was such an annoyance. And then we entered level Lava Scarves and Red Hot Blogs. I think I'll just stick with the name 2-6. It's here I should introduce you to a useful bit of tech. In Mellow Mode we can infinitely flutter, however, turns out we don't actually need Mellow Mode to do this. If you just start fluttering again the second your initial flutter ends, you can maintain height. Just chain a couple of those together and you're infinitely fluttering. Kind of makes the no Mellow Mode rule useless in hindsight. Anyway, what about the level itself? While I don't know how required infinite fluttering is for this level, I most certainly used it. The first section wasn't all too bad, although the end made me make a scary throw. The second section is where infinite fluttering comes into use. There are these teetering platforms which would just be impossible to use as one person, so I just decided to not use them. But we're not out of the woods just yet. After that we have this donut platform section. You know, platforms which quickly disappear after being stood on. Standing on them is pretty much a death sentence, so we're going to have to try our best to avoid them. We can't infinite flutter of them because of this wall, so I had no plan to get around them, so I just do the strategy of throw myself at it enough times until I get lucky, and get lucky I did. After that we can just flutter over the rest of the level and move on. Now as for the issue with 2-7 the Desert Pyramid Beckons, to put it simply, death. This level is already long, but add a jumpless challenge on top of that, and I can be spending over 10 minutes on a single attempt, which is an issue when I die and lose all that progress. I'm not exaggerating when I say this level alone almost made me quit, as spending 10 minutes on a long and tedious level just to die was very soul-crushing. But as for the level itself, this was annoying, and this was annoying. But I was able to beat it, and it only took me a month to mentally recover. I'm not joking. The final level of this world is Bunsen the Hot Dog's Castle, which I mean, that's subjective. Now, this level looks scary. You think these moving platforms over lava would be the bane of my existence, but surprisingly a couple of precise throws do the trick. While they are quite difficult, they're not what I'm interested in. My focus is on this section. While I would normally just be able to throw myself up, the fire patterns would stop me from doing so. Going on either of the sides would just take too long and be a death sentence, so we're gonna have to try and find another way. We know we can't go up through the sides, so my plan was just to go straight up, through the middle. This seems impossible with our current moveset, but there's something I failed to mention. We know we can maintain height by timing out our flutters, but what if I told you there's a way to gain height? We start out by egging to get on top of the other player, bounce, and then infinite flutter. Then comes the hard part. While already infinitely fluttering with one player is hard enough, you then need to egg the other one, and use that egg to either switch places mid-air, or giving the already fluttering one another boost, and then you can chain a couple of those together. I'll be calling this Advanced Infinite Fluttering, and I think it goes without saying it is stupidly difficult to pull off. Luckily for us, Advanced Infinite Fluttering is just what we need to get through this section. As for Bunsen himself, we just have to do a more difficult version of what we already did for Big Montgomery. We can't keep a player airborne in advance this time, so we're just gonna have to do our trick after hitting him. But if we keep that in mind, we can make sure that we know what we're having for lunch. World 3 gives us a warm welcome by spitting in our face. 3-1 Yoshis and Cookies is a level that I genuinely thought was impossible. This level's gimmick is these things which collapse when you walk under them, which you can then use as a platform. Pretty much a Mario Womp in disguise. The issue comes when you're supposed to chain a bunch of these together, and just as luck would have it, they're timed. Going up to the second one seems useless, so what I tried for a while was getting on top of the first one, and then bouncing up to the third. We couldn't just throw up to the third one to begin with, as the screen stops us. But not like it matters anyway, as even if I made it to the third one, there's so much more which we just don't have time to do. It seems going up these platforms is just impossible, which is why I was ready to give up. But after a bit of brainstorming, I realized I was being way too tunnel visioned, and there is a way around it. Advanced Infinite Fluttering. But that doesn't mean it's easy, as this ledge is much higher than the one in 2.8, so we have to chain a lot more of these together. I knew it was theoretically possible, so even after failing for several minutes, I persevered until I got that perfect attempt. Fortunately for us, the level ends right after that, so we can move on to 3-2, Wobbly Mobile Jaunt. Now what's interesting about this level is actually how uninteresting it is. For the first time since World 1, we have a level which has nothing of value, which is why it has so much value to me. You can just throw your way through the whole level, but after what I've been through, I'll take it as I deserve a break. And it seems the game would agree, as 3-3 Scarf Roll Scamper has been the shortest level thus far, as I could beat it in only 7 minutes. While 3-4 Big Montgomery's Bubble Fort isn't exactly free, it is on the easier side. This part in particular gave me some trouble, but after a couple minutes I cleared it pretty easily. As for the boss, it's a refight of Big Montgomery, which, considering how much trouble we had with him the first time, you would expect it to be just as bad. Sure, he technically is harder, now being more difficult to hit and having actual threatening attacks, but after what I've learned over the past 2 worlds since I last fought him, I was able to take him down with only 1 death. 3-5 Fluffin' Puffin' Babysitting is just a throwing simulator, no issues there. You're able to skip half the level in 3-6, amazing post-pounding, so once again no issues. But our carefree, no-issue streak stops there in 3-7 Fanciful Fluff and Feathers. Our first worry comes in the form of clouds, as once you enter, to stay in it, you need to continuously jump. You can pretty much think of it as floating quicksand. Weirdly enough, however, I found my best plan of action wasn't to try and avoid the clouds, but instead to just gun it through them. Whatever works, I suppose. But my main concern came at the end, where there are these 2 synchronized timed platforms. I thought some advanced infinite fluttering would do the trick, but for whatever reason I just couldn't get it. And as for trying to throw our way up, that kills us. But after a lot of trying, I realized I could get high enough with advanced infinite fluttering to where I could see the platform we need to get to, and mid-air throw our way up, so that the screen doesn't kill us. Shortly after realizing that, I was able to get it and move on to the final level of this world. 3-8 Miss Cluck the Insincere's Castle. Imagine naming your kid that. The platforming is fine, but how did I deal with Miss Cluck herself? Considering how you can only hit her while she's in the air, and most of her attacks are based around floor hazards, my best option was to try and stay airborne most of the fight. Doing so, I was able to beat this boss pretty easily, and by extension, move on to World 4. 4-1 Monkeying Round and Round introduces us to the mechanic of ropes, which are nothing but an annoyance. The 2 issues that come with rope is that we automatically grab them, and we can't throw an eaten player while we're on them, one of our primary methods of movement. To get past these annoyances, we'd either have to try and ignore them altogether, or go on top and pop an egged player. We can do this until this section, where I was having trouble with these seed-spitting monkeys not letting me line up my egg pop. That wasn't until I realised I was being dumb, and there was a watermelon of my own I could have been using. After that, the level can be easily beaten and we can move on. Now sit down, gather round, cause I gotta tell you a story. 4-2 Lakitu Peekaboo. This level is an auto-scroller. How great. Obviously with our moveset, keeping up with an auto-scroller is difficult, and we can't make a single slip up or else we'll fall too far behind and be crushed by the screen. We want to play slowly and carefully to make sure we don't mess up, but if we play too slow, well, you know the outcome. Play cautiously and quickly and you might just be able to make it through in time. But it doesn't end there. No. After playing an easy section of the level, we enter this door and... Yeah, I'm sorry, does this look possible to you? This section is far too fast and long for us to even make a hint of progress. And in case you think I'm gonna fake you out with some sort of way to avoid it entirely, I assure you there's no such way, and we have to do this to progress. So is this it? Is this really where our journey comes to an end? After all we've been through, a couple of falling blocks are really what stop us? Well, I mean, they're unavoidable, and clearly making it through isn't gonna happen, so unfortunately I think it is. No, I refuse. While it's true there's no way around it, I refuse to give up there. Surely if we're quick enough, we'd be able to make some progress, right? I'm not saying it's possible, but I'm saying it's not as hopeless as it seems. Slowly over the span of a couple hours, I was able to make it further and further, until I realized this just might be possible. Hours upon hours of attempts later, I died at the last throw. Filled with pure determination, I just kept throwing not only the Yoshis, but myself at this room over and over. And then, it happened. By all means, that should not have been possible, yet somehow I pulled it off. After that, we can just get the hell out of there. But just in case you're worried I'd catch a break, 4-3 rolling down the river is also an issue. At the end, there is another auto-scroller. I think this game just hates me. To be more specific, the issue is that we're actually on a raft, and falling into the water is a death sentence. Now, the water doesn't directly kill us, but it's more so the fact that we need to jump out of the water, and given the auto-scroller, we don't really have a way to do that. Despite this, we can just throw our way through the level, and although it is pretty difficult, it is possible and we can beat the level. 4-4 Not Wing the Koopa's Aquafor also has water, but this time in an even more worrying context. Now, given this level, I should probably go into more detail on why water is so bad. Water limits our movement, so not only can we not jump out of it, it also makes it so we can't throw the other player. I don't know why it does this, but whatever the reason is, it makes it a lot more difficult. And also, while not water specific, you cannot egg yourself while being bored with another player. At first, I thought this meant there was no way out of the water once we entered like this, but after a couple of resets, I learnt there is one way out, that being to struggle. I haven't mentioned this move, as typically there are better alternatives, but if you mash while being bored, you can break out of it, and this is our only way out of water if we enter like this. Now, while it is the only way of exiting the water when we're like this, it is not the only way of exiting water overall, as there are two more methods. Firstly is if we egg a player in advance, we can pop our way out, or if we eat another player but don't ball them, we can also spit them out, although we can't do this while fully submerged. At this point, you're probably wondering what the issue even is if we have ways out of the water, but as always, it's timed sections. Timed sections are already bad enough with our limited movesets, but limit that even more and we have an issue. In this section, what you need to do is raise the water with this block, swim over here in time, and then throw something at this question mark cloud. What took me way too long to realise is that we actually don't want the other players to be bored, and we want to hit the block, hold them in our mouth, swim over, and then hit the cloud. Shortly after realising that, I did it. As for the rest of this level, the end was a bit worrying, but I soon realised that my best option was to not use the water at all. And as for the boss, you would expect a water-related boss to be hell, especially considering how it's a refight of Notwing, a boss which already gave us issues before, but surprisingly, this new water variant is even easier to hit, which makes this fight more than possible. As for a level which gave me an actual issue, 4-5 Sunset Curtain Falls does the trick. This level's gimmick is curtains you're supposed to jump between. In fact, there's nothing but that in this level. Unfortunately for us, there's only one way off these curtains, that being to fall. That means to progress in this level, we need to fall off a curtain as itself is falling, and then infinite flutter to the next one. Now, while this makes this one of the hardest levels in this challenge, just behind 4-2, there isn't a whole lot to talk about as this level just consists of doing that very hard trick over and over. However, there are two things I'd like to bring up. Firstly, you grab onto the curtains automatically, and because we drop off them, stuff like this can happen. Secondly, a few times after advanced infinite fluttering for up to 10 minutes on one attempt, I would just die. Needless to say, this level took me a few hours. 4-6 Spooky Scraps, Don't Get Spooked, wasn't a particularly hard level, but it confused me more than I'd like to admit. Also, this section was pretty fun as I could just infinite flutter over the whole thing, but other than that, nothing particularly noteworthy. 4-7 Yoshi Branches Out is potentially one of the most annoying levels in this challenge. There are these arrow rotating platforms which, when you stand on, go in whichever direction the arrow was pointing when you stood on them. You're supposed to be able to jump to course correct, but because we can't do that, most of the time I spent on this level was just me bouncing around and hoping I got lucky. And then there's this section which was also really annoying, as these waterfalls push me down, which would make infinite fluttering over really difficult. And to end off this world, we have 4-8, Naval Piranha's Sewer. This section was a little difficult, as I had to advance infinite flutter while fighting the water streams and avoiding these spike balls, but it was manageable up until the boss. Naval Piranha is like if you took the worst parts about Not Wing the Koopa and Miss Clock's fights and combined them into one. To hit this boss, all you need to do is grab a bomb that they throw and throw it into their mouth. For the first hit, this is mostly fine, although when we actually have them stunned, it's a little difficult to actually hit them in time, but it's far from impossible. The issue comes after the hit, when spiky stems roll over the flooring. Reminiscent of anything? Only this time we don't have much time to get airborne to avoid the attack. The second hit is more of the same, so while it is equally annoying, there's nothing particularly noteworthy. The trouble comes during the third. The stem attack is buffed, making it near impossible to avoid, as now not only does it sprawl across the ground, but now alternates between that and in the air. While technically you're able to advance Infinite Flutter high enough to where it can't hit you, it's so precise that I only got this once, so like it or not, you will be taking a few hits here. Then, after the bomb attack, Naval Piranha uses a new move, where 2 piranhas go across the ground. You'd think this wouldn't be an issue, as I could just get airborne during the bomb attack, but it is for 2 reasons. Firstly, getting the bombs now becomes very difficult, and secondly, once you're holding a bomb, you cannot be eaten or egged without the bomb just basically disintegrating. And so if you have a bomb and you're on the ground, you're just stuck there. After the sweeping attack, where you're supposed to be airborne, the devs decided to punish anyone who was airborne by having Naval Piranha come from the top of the screen. I died to all 3 of these attacks equally, and spent over an hour on this boss fight, failing over and over and over, getting far more frustrated than I should have, but eventually I did manage to pull it off. Also, side note, I threw the bomb while being eaten at the same time, which seems to have glitched the bomb in place. No, I just thought it was interesting. And with that, World 4 has been beaten, and we can move on. Luckily for us, the first level of World 5, Fluffy Snow Here We Go, is not all too bad. Practically just a hold right simulator. As for 5-2 Frozen Solid and Chilled, we can just use these water streams to boost our way through the level. But 5-3 Flying Carpet Cruise is at least a little more interesting. We're supposed to have full control over these flying carpets, moving to change directions, crouching to go down, and jumping to go up. But obviously we're missing one of those crucial directions. Because of this, I came to the conclusion that I shouldn't even be using the carpets at all, and should just flutter over the entire level, which mostly worked surprisingly well, and I was able to beat the level pretty quickly. 5-4 Big Montgomery's Ice Fort is a bit more problematic, however. The problem is actually in the ice itself. You see, ice is exceptionally slippy in this game, making even trying to stand semi-still on it an issue if it's sloped, which would be problematic if there just so happened to be multiple sloped rotating ice platforms chained together with penguins knocking you off. Oh no, that just so happens to be exactly that. Who could have guessed? Well, normally I'd just try to avoid the problem altogether and advanced Infinite Flutter my way up. Those sliding pushy penguins make that more than a little difficult, so I had to try and go up the normal way. From what I could tell, there wasn't really a strategy I could do other than throwing myself at it repeatedly, and so I did. After quite a while of attempts, I managed to just luck out, and a penguin which by all means should have pushed me just somehow bounced me, which gave me enough height for me to make it across. After that, we get to fight Big Montgomery for a 3rd time, and this is the easiest out of them yet, so with that, 5-4 is beatable. As for 5-5, A Little Light Snowfall, this level has a unique issue of being able to softlock us. The level is built around falling snow, and if that snow happens to land on the player, we are just completely stuck unless we jump out. So yeah, we're just completely stuck, forcing a restart every time this happens. But after some tricky platforming and some unfortunate deaths, this level can be conquered. Up Shuttle Thread Pass, 5-6. This level is just really funny as we can practically skip it all with advanced Infinite Fluttering. I mean, this section had a weird camera lock which made it hard to skip, but I mean I could still skip it, so yeah, this level is pretty easy. 5-7 was pretty uneventful at first, just ride the platforms and throw the other player if need be, but near the end of the level, there was a section giving me some trouble. There was a wall of ice blocks in my path, and those also dreaded penguins are back. I couldn't get high enough to go in the holes, and going above didn't work either. But after a while of trial and error, I learned I could go far enough below to go beneath the ice blocks, but maintain enough height to make it back on the platform. Mix that with a lucky penguin placement and a bounce, one fun ride upwards later and we can clear the stage. The final level to World 5 was pretty underwhelming. I mean, this section with rolling ice blocks gave me a bit of trouble, as not getting crushed was way harder than it looked, but it was far from impossible. And as for the boss, it quite literally took me 2 minutes. And with that we can move on to the final world of this game, World 6. 6-1, Lair of the Smooch Spiders, as the name implies, has a lot of spiders. The spiderwebs are similar to the water and rope mechanics in the sense that I once again can no longer throw a bored player, making struggling our best way out. Luckily, however, this level was far from a struggle, and keeping mashing in mind, we can beat this level pretty quickly. But just in case you thought this challenge was getting too easy, Snag Snitch Mountain picks up the slack. Moving spikes is what this level is themed around, and my god are they annoying. They do have this mechanic where you can throw a wall at them, and it disables the spikes, holds it in place, and turns it into a platform. However, it's timed, so I never actually did this. Now, while the level was difficult, there was no particular point of interest until the end. You would think I could just advance infinite flutter my way up, however, with all those spikes in the way, you're bound to at least get hit, or even die. I tried my best to get up, but I would just keep getting hit back down. That wasn't until I got one attempt where I got stupidly lucky, and just managed to make my way up. Which, I mean, that should not have worked, but my god am I not complaining. 6-3 is one of the most unique levels in the run. You're supposed to hit 2 question mark clouds which both spawn a way to get up. However, you should know by now that I'll get up to some chicanery, and turns out we don't need to hit one of the question mark clouds to make it up, and we can simply throw the other player up. This skips about half the level, but how does the half of the level that we actually do treat us? Well, the level is themed around fire, and actually dodging that fire can be rather challenging, even resulting in a few deaths. But I mean, it's still rather manageable. However, this level does have one more trick up its metaphorical sleeve. Once we enter the door that we cheat our way to, the level gets a bit mad that we did that and gives us a rising lava section, very reminiscent of the one in 4-2. Only difference this time is instead of the danger coming from above, it comes from below. However, unlike in 4-2, this section is actually impossible. Kinda. While it is impossible to get through, I'm not going to fake you out again, and I will tell you there is a way to circumvent this roadblock. That being, for the first time in this challenge, to use a badge. After beating 2-4, we unlock the Immunity to Fire and Lava badge, which is as useful as it sounds. Not only does it make the first half of this level a cakewalk, but it also makes this once impossible section near impossible to fail. And after that is the end of the level, meaning it is possible. I don't like the next level, that being not being the Koopa's Sky Fort. It starts out with the balloon riding section. The balloons significantly slow down when you're standing on them, but that's not an issue as you could just flutter between them to gain height. Then there's some platforms we can only stand on a limited amount of times, but we can just flutter under them, and they're not an issue. And then there's another balloon section, but we can skip the horizontal part by fluttering, and skip the vertical part in the most fun way possible. All that seems simple enough, and it is. So why do I dislike this level? The boss. Hitting him is stupidly difficult as what you need to do is throw a wall at his bullet bill launcher. However, you're given practically no stun time to do this, so you know what? Why use the stun time at all? I came to the conclusion that my best bet was to try and snipe the cannon as he's doing a different attack, but this is far from easy. Not only am I trying to snipe a small, moving target, but I also got to do that while avoiding other projectiles. As for his attacks, none of them are even particularly difficult. My issue is just how much I was focusing on hitting him made me pay less attention to his attacks, and I would end up dying because of that. I cannot stress enough how hard it was to actually hit this cannon, but I found a setup which worked more consistently, and once I did, I could actually beat the stupid, poorly designed boss. 6-5 quite literally has nothing noteworthy, however, I can't say the same about 6-6 Feel Fuzzy Get Clingy. This level mixes sticky walls and conveyors together, but as always that limits our moveset, so we once again can no longer throw the other player, nor do we have a way to get off. So once again, egging will be our best bet. This worked for a while until this spike wall was giving me some trouble. Having to pop the other player while making sure I didn't go into the spikes myself was a challenge. However, I quickly overcame this, only to be met with something much worse. We have this section very reminiscent of the one in 2-4, where we're supposed to go up the sides, but can't because of things that come down. Only difference this time is how we need to go much, much higher. Each attempt could take up to 5 minutes, and I'm sure you can imagine how advanced infinite fluttering for 5 minutes straight is not only stupidly difficult, but also makes it all the more soul-crushing when I mess up. However, like most things in this challenge, perseverance is enough to get us through, but that's not the last difficult part of this level. You would think this section with all these spikes would be terrible, but it's actually a lot easier than it looks, as simply repeatedly spitting the other player is enough to get us across pretty easily. No, my issue came with this section with all these spikes. Specifically, these conveyors were giving me issues as we have to fight against the direction of the bottom one, while avoiding the spikes from the side, while also needing to get another player to the conveyor above was a lot to handle, but far from impossible. And I don't even know what happened here. The level ends with super fast conveyors, which are annoying. This footage isn't sped up, mind you, but annoying doesn't mean difficult. And as for 6-7, we can infinite flutter through most of the level and get some really lucky bounces and beat it pretty trivially. And after all our efforts, we find ourselves standing outside the castle of the final level. And we only really have one option. So we enter. We're immediately thrown into enemies, but some quick reaction time gets us past that dirty trick pretty easily, and we quickly find ourselves riding up the elevator to the main floor. We need to hit these coloured statues with wool of their respective colour, but luckily we can halve the amount we need to traverse through the castle by using ourselves to hit the statues, so now we only need white and blue. I decided to go for the blue wall first as I knew the location of it, so a simple bounce off some water and a quick slam into some water and we find ourselves with the blue wall. But we're quickly introduced to a unique problem. Egging makes us drop our wall, and eating the other player gives that wall to whoever is holding the player. This limits our moveset quite a lot to pretty much just bouncing off each other and being able to egg or throw the one who isn't holding the wall, which isn't all too helpful as we want to be escorting the one with the wall. So let's go through how I escorted the blue wall. I started out by getting the player without the wall on top of the player with it, so I could slam into the water, go underneath the walled player, so then I could safely slam into the water with the wall. And then I have to basically replicate that strategy underneath this semi-solid while watching out for this enemy. But I was a little stumped on what to do here, as we need to get into that pipe. After a while of messing around, I learned I can actually throw the wall without breaking it, so long as it hits the other player, which I didn't know before, so I did exactly that. After that, we're kind of stuck in a big water pit, but this is a lot easier to get out of than you might think. Simply get the walled player on top, and then they can be scooped up by the swinging ball. After that, we can hit our third statue, and now only white remains. Now, I'm not even gonna lie, this white wall is quite trivial, just do a handful of throws and walk back. Then there's an auto-scroller, which is so slow that it's slow even for the jumpless challenge. And with that, we can enter the final boss door. Saying the first phase of the Baby Bowser fight was anticlimactic would be an understatement. It is very easy, but the second phase is a lot more interesting. Baby Bowser is mega-sized and we need to grab those Giga Warbles to throw at his 8 pills, and that's how we defeat him. But there's a lot more to be looking out for. He doesn't exactly have a wide moveset, only 2 attacks to be exact, those being a hand slam and spreading some fire across the arena. And while neither of them would be hard to avoid in isolation, they do make the arena a lot harder to traverse. Once we hit 4 out of his 8 pills, he wrecks the arena, making it even more difficult to traverse. And I would like to add that his pills are rotation locked to his head, so ones at the back of his head stay at the back, and obviously he tries to face you as much as possible, making the ones at the back a lot harder to hit. And of course, because I'm dumb, I didn't get rid of them when they were easier to hit. So now I have to hit the harder to get pills in the harder to traverse arena. This boss fight lasted a long time, but I was slowly dwindling his amount of pills, until there was just one left. And then, I took the last throw. Baby Bowser has been defeated, and so I can say with confidence that yes, it is possible to beat Yoshi's Woolly World without jumping. Okay, editing Harry here. I had a different outro recorded, but I wanted to say this instead. This video quite literally started production over a year ago now, and while admittedly a lot of that time I haven't been working on it, this was generally the hardest video of mine to make. Not only has the challenge been the hardest one thus far, but I also tried to change up my writing and editing style quite significantly. I mean, I'm using a whole new editing program than the one I was using last time I made a video like this. Either way, point is, this video took a lot of effort, and so if you enjoyed it, please express that. Whether that be a subscription, or even just a comment telling me you enjoyed it would mean a lot to me. I'm sorry this video took so long, but I won't keep you any longer, and bye!